Call to order the work session for the City of East Grand Forks, Tuesday, November 14th. 2017 is now 5 o'clock. City Clerk, please call roll.
Mayor Steve Gander.
Here.
Council President Mark Olstad.
Here.
Council Vice President Chad Grassel. Council Members Clarence Batter.
Here.
Mike Tukshavinsky.
Here.
Tim Riopel.
Here.
Henry Tweeten. Mark Demers.
Does adjourn the quorum. Number 1, consider Monopole cell tower request. Ms. Ellis.
As you recall, this presentation and cell tower location was presented to the council back in 2014. The application was withdrawn by Verizon and Valley Gulf because the ordinance itself wasn't specific to where they could be located in residential districts. We removed that ambiguity and changed the ordinance to allow for it in open space and church locations, typical to West Fargo, Crookston, a few other local area ordinances where there would be more room for the fall location setback, those types of things, because we wanted to remove it from the specific residential neighborhood locations. Based on that, I won't go into too much detail other than there are 2 types of things that you're considering. One being from a planning standpoint for a cell tower where we're looking at setbacks, color, where we can make adjustments in terms of height, those requirements. All of those planning requirements have been met, and that is what we would consider for a building code. However, in order to obtain a cell tower or monopole tower permit, a special use permit would need to be approved. And the special use permit is more in looking at things like, is this unsightly? Will this deter from the neighborhood? It involves 6 criteria. And the criteria are listed in your report. And I'll just go over them quickly. And that's what you would base your findings on if you were to approve or deny the application. They are: the use will not create an excessive burden on public facilities and utilities. The use would be sufficiently compatible with or separated by sufficient distance from or screened from adjacent land uses so that there would be no deterrence to the use or development of adjacent land and uses. Each structure or improvement is so designed and constructed so that it is not unsightly in appearance to the extent that it will hinder the orderly and harmonious development of the district wherein proposed. The use is consistent with the purposes of Chapter 10 and the purposes of the zoning district, and those were the requirements that I had mentioned to you before, in which the applicant intends to locate the proposed use. It's not in conflict with the land use plan, and adequate measures have been taken to provide ingress and egress so designed to minimize traffic congestion, adequate access to public roads, on-site parking, etc. So the 2 criteria I think that pertain most to this application special use permit for the monopole tower are numbers 2 and 3. Are they sufficiently compatible with the use? Are they a sufficient distance? Are they screened? Is it designed and constructed so that it is not unsightly in appearance? And so those would be the 2 criteria we would be considering, I think, in the most detail when it comes to a special use permit. I have provided you the information that we have received from Verizon Wireless, which includes their propagation maps, which are required as to why they feel that the tower is needed in this area for their coverage. I have also included information from the neighbors in the area, included a cellular use map that shows, in fact, that the cellular use in that area is just fine. And so really it's kind of I would say, an argument between if in fact this is the best location, if they have provided us all the information from Verizon, and the neighbors have provided some valuable insight as to why they do or do not, or why they do not want the tower in their area. I could go into extended detail. I know we have a number of neighbors here, so I would let them speak for themselves. Just quickly to summarize, based on the meeting, the Planning Commission did recommend approval based on the 6 criteria, and that they felt that this was probably the best location in that area where it would be so screened. However, in the ordinance, they did state that it would be a good idea, and Ron and I had visited about this at length, because Verizon's going to continue to state that they're going to need to provide coverage to people in that area. Another consideration for you before approval or denial would be to request an independent radio frequency study to determine where cell towers are needed within the city of East Grand Forks, and if this particular location is in fact needed or the best location for a good cell phone and data service, or if there are other actual locations that would be more beneficial. So the independent a study from an independent contractor would be paid for by the applicant, which would be Verizon Wireless. And they could, in fact, determine, based on the 4 other towers that we have in the city and their proposed lacking of data service to a certain number of residents in the area, that they wouldn't have a horse in the race. So they may look at it and say, yes, this is a good location, or no, there are a few others, in fact, that may be better served to those people that, don't have the best data. So I'm open for questions. If you have no other questions for me, I know there are people here, so.
Anybody from the council have any questions for Ms. Ellis at this time? Mr. Demers.
If we go forward with a feasibility study, is there any steerage from the council or from your office as to things we'd like them to consider, or is it completely independent?
Well, based upon our ordinance, and our ordinance specifically says what they're supposed to be looking at. I don't have that with me, but
I provided the
Nancy
section.
provided most of that in here.
They may review and approve the written certification of the applicant's engineer being the reason why they put it there, based on the propagation studies. They may review and approve the structural integrity, electrical integrity, the electrical safeness of the wireless facility, as to ensure the protection, health, and safety welfare. They also may review and approve the applicant's studies showing the necessity for and location of the tower. So.
Mr. Tweeten.
Mr. President, we have people in attendance who live up there, and I think you should give them an opportunity to speak.
I have a couple comments myself right now that I know have spoken to a couple people from that neighborhood, and I actually do live in that neighborhood also, just farther east on that neighborhood street on 20th Street. And with the discussion that listening to my constituents, I would have a tough time proving it. And I know personally that with listening to them and the wishes of that area and the residents there, I would be not voting to move this thing forward at all. So those are my wishes. And I know that we do have people from that neighborhood here if they would like to speak. If they do, you could come up to a mic and state your name and your address for the record, and if you have any comments. Tim, you have one?
Isn't this the same tower that Grand Forks shot down that they were going to put at University Park?
No.
Verizon did want one there.
Yes. But I don't think this is the same tower, no.
It was the same principle. They were going to do a wood type appearance or something on it and put it in the middle of the neighborhood, and the neighbors, they're objected to it.
Oh, I don't, are you referring to the look of the tower?
The look of the tower and location
Okay.
was in a residential area.
That I don't know. I thought you meant, is this the one that Grand Forks shot down because of the coverage? No, this is different coverage than that one. I can't tell you what Grand Forks votes on. I do know that they have towers in residential locations. So, but that specific application, I know nothing about, so.
Does any of the residents want to come up at all and make comments at all? Gerard? Okay. If you want to grab a mic from Henry there, you can sit right
I
here.
can talk loud enough, or I can grab a mic.
Well, we need a mic for the,
Okay.
Henry, you want to give him your mic?
Thank you, Mr. President and council members. As probably some of you know, my name is Gerard Neal, and my wife Cindy is here with me. We live at 1838 20th Street Northwest. And I know that the council would like to abbreviate their meetings, but I would like to take a few minutes. And I'm not going to go on and on like George Longmire did from years ago. We bought our lot in 1987. And the reason we bought a lot because we wanted to stay in East Grand Forks and build a home. Prior to that, we lived on 21st Street Northwest, and an individual built a slab on grade next door to us. We had a hard time selling our house. We sold it for 1/3 less than we had into it. We did not want that to happen again. We were the first ones to buy a lot out there after the home directly to the west of us was built, and we had Munson's house 2 doors down. Everything in that cul-de-sac was sold and built before we built our home. And we did that specifically so that we could control the type and style of the home that we wanted to, and we also wanted to make sure that we did not have the most expensive home on the lot. Well, it turned out for city assessing for many years later, we were the second highest assessed house in East Grand Forks. Not complaining, explaining. We built our house. We built it specifically for the golf course. It's on the golf course. We were right off the clubhouse. We had the cart storage there. Representations were made that that was going to be removed. We had the view of the number 1 tee box, the number 1 green, the number 13 tee box, the number 18 green, the number 9 green, the 10 tee box, the 12 green, and the 10 green. We had the apex of the best lot on the golf course. We also had the water fountain spraying water. We looked at that. We have 29, excuse me, I'll be correct, 28 windows facing north, 1 door with full-length glass. I consider that to be 29 windows. That faces north. We twisted our house about 11 degrees northwest so that we could get a complete view of the golf course. The other thing is, my wife likes the 2 oak trees that were back there. We put a double bank of windows in our family room. We have a bank of 6 windows that are 6 feet tall. We put another bank of 3-foot windows on top of that. So that when we're sitting on the couch, my wife, we spent a tremendous amount of money putting 10 feet of windows in our house, so to speak, so that when she's sitting on the couch, we can see the full oak trees that are there. Flood of 97 hit. Flood of 97 hits, the dike goes in behind us. The Corps moved it a little bit. They added a bunch of trees to try to make it aesthetically more pleasing. So we have the trees, we have the dike back there. The clubhouse moves. We have north of us, we have 2 towers. When that light turns, earlier a few years ago, they converted the red lights to the white lights. Guess what? Unintended consequences. With all those 29 windows, if you want to call them all windows, in the middle of the night when they have the white lights on, that flashing comes into our bedroom as well as our main floor. That wakes me up, not so much my wife, but that to me is pollution. Having the dike behind me is pollution. Last night, I went over there and drove. If anybody complains about being on the golf course with a set of tires, that's mine. I drove out onto the site to look where that tower is going to go. That tower will be 65 feet tall. According to what Mr. Parker has measured, the nearest tree, which is more than 75 feet away from what I can tell, because they have to have a fall pattern of 115% of the 65-foot tower, one tree that's about 43 feet, maybe 45 feet. Imagine that adding another 50% of the height of that tree in the middle of nowhere. What you have to the south is the cart storage, and what you have to the north is a 43, 45-foot tree. A couple other trees that are about 25 feet tall, 20 feet tall. That tower is in the middle of nowhere. If you look at the tower that's on 3rd and 20th, You look at that tower, that is buried in a bunch of trees. There's no fall pattern on that one. They have a tower approximately 1/2 to 3/4 of a mile north of East Grand Forks. They have that tower. They have one on 3rd and 20th. The explanation that they gave, and the reason my wife is here, she's the one that pointed out very aptly, I might say, where our house is located, they wanted to increase the usage because there was going to be increased usage, more users in that area. The only new users that are going to be in that area is going to be AT&T, T-Mobile, and all the other ones, because as part of your process, they are required to look or sell out different portions of that tower to competitors. And the reasoning for it, which does make sense, is that you don't want every cell phone provider providing their own tower. So it's going to be saturated. What it is that Verizon doesn't need it in that area. They're saying they're going to increase the south and east. What's south and east? What's south is the river. What's north is either a graveyard or you have the golf course. There is not a significant amount of homes that's going to create new service that would justify a tower in that area. In response, Verizon says that the reason they are going with that area is because it's the best area, or it's been represented that it's the best. The best for what? It's the best for Verizon. It is no different than if you want to buy a piece of equipment, and I don't care, we'll take one for the city. And I'm not suggesting no innuendo at all that East Grand Forks does this. But let's say that your maintenance department wants a Toro lawnmower, or they want a Komatsu dozer, or they want some type of a payloader that would be Caterpillar. All you have to do, and Ben, you can probably back me up on this, all you have to do is take the Caterpillar specifications as to each and every, what the horsepower is, what their hydraulics are, the size of the tires, whatever you want to do, write your specs for that particular model number of a piece of equipment, put out bids on that, and then you can award the bids based upon who complies with it. And I suspect that that's what Verizon is doing, because every single question that was asked of the representative here a week ago on specific questions, what particular area? I'm not an RF engineer. I'm not this, I'm not that. Otherwise, he had an answer for it. It's expanding usage. There will be increased usage, but what it is it is a profit motive for Verizon. It's very specifically for them to add other cell phone companies and increase their data that's going to be farther, and it is going to be in a greater area of coverage than just that portion of East Grand Forks. You already have one on a tower to the north that's saturating and covering that area. You have one on 3rd and 20th that's saturating and covering that area. You have another one that's going up by the VFW next year, and there's 2 other cell phone towers in the south end of East Grand Forks that I've been told. When you take a look at that, if you also take a look at the tower that was going to be in University Park in Grand Forks, and if that would have been adequate, why do you have to have one here in East Grand Forks? What I am upset about is that that is a 3rd, if not 4th, form of pollution invading my home. And we spent a significant amount of money. I'm not going to say how much we spent. I'm not trying to brag. I'm not trying to do anything like that at all, but to impress upon the City Council that, in my opinion, is another pollution that is going in my backyard. I have enough pollution back there. I have put up enough money and invested in this city. As many of you know, I doubled the size of my practice here about the building about 5-6 years ago. And I'm committed to East Grand Forks. I've stayed to East Grand Forks. I want to stay in East Grand Forks. And there is no legitimate reason. The explanation is that this was the best place. It may be the best place that's left. That's not the question. The question is, are there other available properties that can be used or utilized? You can saturate the market by using many other different methods. Nothing concrete, nothing has been definitively shown by Verizon, anything that I have heard, anything that I have received that shows that this is the only spot, let alone the best spot, that should be utilized for the placement of their tower. The materials, I'm not certain if you have what materials you have. There is a picture that Mr. Parker provided, I think, that gives a very good schematic, and that would be this one here. I don't know if everyone can see that. It is supposed to be a simulated photograph of the height of those trees. These trees are what are measured to be 43 to 45 feet. This tower is represented as being low. It's 65 feet, but it's being represented as being lower than what those trees are. These two trees are the only trees in the area that are even close to it. You can see some other bushes and some smaller ones. Those are 15 to maybe 20, 25 footers at best. I don't see how this can be a stealth tower. It's stealth because they cover up all the antennas. Other than that, it's a great big, very tall, on top of or next to a large building that's in the middle of a parking lot. You can call where the old clubhouse was, an old parking lot. It's adjacent to one. That's what you have.
That picture's on page 24 of your packet.
Yeah.
Ask a question.
Yes.
You've had an extensive experience in real estate. What do you think that this land would be suited for remaining land back there by the original?
What I would suggest is this. If you're going to use something, single-family residence is what you could develop it for. In my opinion, move the clubhouse back. That's not going to happen. But if you're going to take the clubhouse is gone, what it would be is real estate. What Mr. Tweeten is referring to is that I do a significant amount of real estate, and for 30-some years. And I'm not going to go in and say everything that I have, but I'm just going to tell you that I've done a significant amount of real estate. I'm very knowledgeable in residential, commercial, lake property, industrial. That property, if you're going to develop it, would be best for single-family homes. From what I understand, there's 2.8 acres. What you're going to have, from what I've been told, is there's a sewer line that goes in that may need to be relocated. There's a corridor right behind my backyard for all of the utilities for electrical, and that, as far as the sewers, you had sewer and water going to the clubhouse. The sizing of that, I don't know. What would probably be would be a small access, maybe 3 homes. Do I want a home in my backyard? No. I would rather have a home than I would rather having a tower, another, what I would refer to as a pollution. The clubhouse was the best. It's gone. The flood, 97, everybody took a hit. I do not want to take another hit.
Do you have any idea of the value of that talking about?
It's going to be lots in East Grand Forks are going to be dictated by the price of your special assessments. And if you want to get onto that subject, real quickly. The reason why your golf course is not selling is your infrastructure, your utilities are way too expensive, your special assessments. My wife and I, right after the flood of 97, we were in the buyout. We put our name on what I would consider the nicest lot on the golf course in that new addition. And we looked at that lot. We put our name on what I figured it was in the apex to replace what we would have. We had a broad view of the new golf course and said that we were going to buy it. After it was platted, I got a call from Mr. Richter, and he said, Gerard, he said, the lot is yours if you want it. Perfect. What's the price? He said, if I remember correctly, $35,000 for the lot.
Without assessment.
Without assessments. My next question was, what are your assessments? Not solidified, somewhere between $45,000 and $50,000. And I said, you're telling me a $35,000 lot and another $45,000 to $50,000 of specials? Take my name off the list. It's not worth it. That's the problem. So, to answer your question, it will be dictated by the amount of special assessments on probably 3 lots coming out of there, depending on how you can reconfigure the parking lot, or maybe you could even get 4 on it, depending on how you wrapped it around.
And go on from the bench, I'd like to have each person that's here that own lot, houses that they're identifying themselves on stage. Come over. And
Thanks,
then
Gerard.
I'd like to see councilman, mayor ask questions. And then I'd like to make comments.
Henry, I think we know what we can do. I think we're very capable of asking questions. You don't need to tell us what to do.
Okay, well, thank you. Dan Parker, I live at 1723 21st Street Northwest, which is the very last house that you would drive by as you go into the proposed cell tower where it will be going. I think much of what I had planned to say, Gerard really spoke to it very, very well, so thank you for that. I don't have to be totally repeat everything. However, I would like you all to be aware, this is the second house that I've owned on this parking lot. I built the house where Justin Stromey currently lives after the flood of '97 with the sole purpose of having a view of a golf course, right? Backyard, beautiful view of, at that time, like Gerard said, it was hole 1, tee box, hole 9 green, so on and so forth. I had to sell my house, moved out of town, I came back, I'm an East Sider, came back, and I wanted to live on the golf course again. And at that time, I bought the house that I'm currently in right now. My house is for sale right now with the plans of building a new house on the south end in that McBroder Acres. I've spoken with 3 realtors. All 3 realtors have clearly said this is going to really hurt your property values. Everyone in the neighborhood, this is going to hurt your property values. And think about it. Right now, I go out the back, the back where our back patio is, where we eat dinner out in the back patio at our table. And right now, we're overlooking hole 1's green, hole 2 tee box, hole 5 tee box on top of the dike. The only thing we will see is that monstrosity that they call stealth. There's absolutely nothing stealth about this. It's as high as the peak of this roof. It's not a flagpole. It's not stealth. And you talk about one of the things Nancy mentioned was something being unsightly. I can't imagine anything being more unsightly than that sitting on a golf course in a residential area. So just repeat that. Yeah, and then he hit on how misleading that picture is. Now, is Verizon that misleading with all their information? I don't know. I know how misleading that picture is. I went out there and I've lasered those trees over and over and over. I get anywhere from 45, the maximum I got is 48 feet. It's clearly not representative of what that really will be. Probably the biggest flagpole we have in East Side probably sits out in front of this building. Right? What is that? Maybe 30 feet tall? Maximum? 6 inches around? That's a big flagpole. Yeah, in regards to this, I guess I also say this 10-page document that I sent out to the Planning and Zoning Committee, I also did send this via cell power. So there is no need. I have 4 to 5 bars at my house every single day. I use it for business. I use Verizon Wireless for business, and I send PowerPoint presentations day in and day out. There is no need for it in this area, plain and simple. Any questions you have of me?
May I have any questions, Mr. Parker? Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Yes.
You and I have spoken,
Yes, sir.
and I wanted to make sure to bring out the point that you're very engaged, you're very interested, and you're unable to be here a week from tonight.
Yeah, yes, thank you for that. I was unable to be here at the Planning and Zoning meeting last Thursday as I was out of state, and I will be out of state next Tuesday as you guys make your votes and final decisions. I don't want my absence in any way to be thought of as me not being very passionate about this not being placed in my backyard.
Thank you, sir. Any other residents like to speak at all?
Ben Horkin, 1919 20th Street. Gerard, Dan, Keith's over there. There was a good pack of us here last Thursday as well, I guess. Lifetime resident of East Grand Forks, built a home, South End, 2004. Purchased my home currently in the cul-de-sac on 20th Street, 2009. Have 5 children, all under the age of 12. Going to be a lifetime member of this community. Owner of R.J. Zaverl & Sons. Happy employer in this town. As Gerard put it, this doesn't belong. This just smells of something rotten in somebody's backyard, and I don't want it. These guys don't want it. So I would ask that, as Mr. Demers pointed out, there's got to be another option. He pointed that out last Thursday. This cannot be the only option for Verizon. It might be the cheapest option, but that shouldn't matter to the city. The city should do what's best for us, and I believe that's getting it the hell out of town, where the rest of the towers are. So I'm open for questions if you guys got any.
Anybody have any questions for him? See none, sir.
Thank
you. Appreciate it. Keith, did you want to speak at all?
I'm Keith Johnson. I live at 1914 20th Street Northwest in the cul-de-sac by Ben and Gerard and all the other neighbors. I've lived in that cul-de-sac primarily my whole life too. I probably moved in about 6 years old with my parents, and they moved out. I bought the house from them, and it's a beautiful neighborhood. Yeah, you got the view of the golf course, and it's kind of deteriorated, over the years of the flood, and things happen. I guess I'm concerned about property values. I think the city should probably be concerned about property values. I would think. I know everyone says hasn't been proven that it decreases any property values, but I think it's only logical that it would. And if it does, I would say that's going to have some effects on the overall city. It's going to be lost revenue. I would assume our property taxes should decrease if our property values go down. I know we can't talk about health concerns, but I'm going to do it anyways. There's got to be some health-related concerns to worry about with a big tower that can throw off all this RF that everybody talks about. I guess I would ask the city when you guys go to make your vote that you would stop it. North of town, there's open fields all over. There's got to be another better option to place, such a huge tower. And I understand the golf course is probably looking to make some money from the use of some land that's probably not being utilized to its capacity, but I would think that they could sell that portion off for some residential lots, and I think it would be a benefit to everybody, not just the golf course, the city as well. You would think you'd get some definite tax revenue. The overall appearance would definitely be better than a cell phone tower.
Anybody have questions for him? Thank you, sir. Okay, sure.
Cindy Neal, 1838 20th Street. One thing that I wanted to point out, when we were at this planning meeting the last time, I did ask the gentleman from Verizon if there was availability for cell service on the towers that are existing. If they need cell service availability, he could not tell me if there was any available spots on the towers that are already existing. That doesn't determine a need. If there's a need, he needed to say there's nothing available. We don't know if this is actually a need at this time or a perceived need in the future. If it's a perceived need in the future with technology changing the way it is, are you going to need a 65-foot tower anywhere in the future? The other thing is this will always be a low-density housing area, like Gerard pointed out. To the south and west of us is river. To the north of us is golf course, cemetery, lagoon. There is only one direction that tower can serve, which makes no sense to try and do a 360-degree output of power when there can be no housing density, unless Verizon is trying to service Grand Forks and the north end of Grand Forks, which should not be our concern in East Grand Forks. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Just two clarification purposes. One being is that Verizon already has antennas on both the two north towers, the one at 3rd and 20th and the one on the north end of town. They were unclear if they could up the frequency of the antennas on those towers. They did not determine that. So she is correct. They did not look at that, but they do already, in fact, have antennas on both towers. So just to be clear, it's not that they don't have something there. They just don't know if they could up the intensity of that without putting up another tower. And then the second thing is that he did state, and based on the propagation maps, that the areas they're trying to serve are more southeast of the location, and that it doesn't serve a frequency in a circular pattern. That's not how radio frequency works. He couldn't explain it, and I really can't explain it, and that was the only reason why sometimes in independent studies for someone to explain it to us might be beneficial, because we just aren't sure if this is going to come up again, as they've stated. We don't know where towers may be needed in the future. So the idea of possibly an independent study, that may rule this out and find a better location, or it may say this is the best location, and you still may say it still doesn't look good, it's not the intention, it's not necessary. There's nothing that states from an independent study that even if they say this is the best location to provide certain types of service, that you have to approve it. It's just giving you a little bit more information, because I feel like Verizon's obviously going to, that's their goal, right, is to make a profit and get more people to be on Verizon. So obviously they're going to say we need more towers so we can provide better service to more people. That's their job. And so maybe we're not getting, you know, and nobody's wanting it in their backyard. So they don't want a cell tower in their backyard. So that's their point of view. So maybe sometimes just someone independently might provide at least a little insight to us. Now, that being said, you don't have to do that at all, because you have the criteria there, and you know, it's providing you enough to say that it is unsightly or it doesn't meet the compatibility or the use of the area. It's all completely up to you, or you could say that it does. It's just, Ron and I have visited, and we have not explored that option yet for any cell tower. And I think until we maybe look at that, I just don't know if we're going to understand if we're going to need more service or where that should be. So that's just from our standpoint. So,
Mr. Repel?
30-plus years ago, I worked for Motorola Communications. We'll put that out there. These are directional antennas. And I live over by 3rd and 20th. I do not want another antenna anywhere near me, period.
Okay. Mr. Mayor.
One thing I think we have to be really careful to not do is, for example, if we say no and we vote it down, one of the worst things we could do is leave these neighbors with the prospect that it comes back a year from now, and then a year after that. If we've done this 3 years or so, repeatedly trying to find a spot, that's not a way to live. That's not a way to, you know, okay, let's just gear up and ramp up, and meanwhile homes are being sold, and all in the environment of not knowing. And so I like the idea of the study, and then to really proactively work with these companies, find the best places. And best is not only to create a signal that penetrates into these various areas. You have to always, of course, consider all the other neighborhood constraints. That's going to be part of the conversation. It's not just about kicking out a signal that fills a hole, it better also be about being the best neighbor that you can be to the folks who are already here. So I won't be part of just, for example, voting this down and leaving it at that. We must take that step, whatever we do. Even if we say hold off on deciding, we need to know from an independent source, really, what's the best. What are our options? What's the best?
Mr. Murphy, you have something, sir?
Yeah, I would just like to add as well, in the discussions that we've had among staff and being at the meeting last week and the meeting here as well, I do think it would be what's my recommendation that the council do go ahead and authorize the independent study on that, because if we're going to make a long-term plan, I definitely think it's something that we would need in order to make an informed and educated decision on what we need for the future.
On Verizon's dime.
Yeah, I'd say one more.
Sure. Go ahead, sir.
I would ask the council, no matter if it's in our neighborhood or anybody else's neighborhood, to look at or get information from the people who own the towers and see if any more space is needed, no matter what we're doing. If there's space that's needed. If it's not needed in this area, why put one up anywhere?
And that's what
And
the
not just
independent
our
study
neighborhood.
would do. Yep.
Thank you.
Mr. Tweeden.
I'd like to make a comment. We've got lots of land up to the north by the lagoon. That in the future will help the companies that have towers there, because we're trying to stop half a mile north of 23rd to direct the city easterly, because we save money on lift stations, and if we go that way, it's much more economical as far as the police department and fire departments. If you go too far extremes, north or south, you're going to have an additional fire station. You're going to have more policemen to have coverage. So I think if they go up there and take a look at the lagoon, we've got plenty of money, plenty of land up there. And if they want to put a tower up there and it's higher, why, fine. But they should be putting these towers where the people are not. You shouldn't go in an established neighborhood. This almost operates as a condemnation without compensation. That's about what it is, Gerard.
I wasn't going to bring that up, Mr. Tweeden, but I agree with you.
Yeah. And I've done a lot of condemnations, and I understand it. And I went to court, took on the state of Minnesota twice, and beat them.
We want you defending us then.
Yeah. No, but I've spent my whole life trying to better this community. You know that.
Yep.
Mr. Parker, you have something else, sir? Thank you.
Yeah, one other final comment that I thought of when I was sitting over there is after the planning and zoning meeting did finish, I received a couple of texts from board members of the golf course saying, I hope this does not happen. We don't need it. It's a pain in our ass. And we screwed up by not having these conversations with the residential members in the beginning. So for me to receive those messages from board members, and where are the people that want this? Why aren't they here?
I would agree. Mr. Neal.
Thank you, and this will be brief. Well, honest. What I think is that I don't think we have to prove where these towers should go. It's the obligation of the applicant, which is Verizon, to establish that they need to place it in East Grand Forks to service East Grand Forks. I think what this is a saturation for areas far outside East Grand Forks. I could be 100% wrong. It's not up to us to do the, Mr. Mayor, I disagree. I don't think it's up to the city of East Grand Forks to prove where they should go. I think they need to prove to us that there's not other cell phone tower space that's available, that they can't be located in other parts of East Grand Forks that's not going to interfere with residential property values. There are plenty of other sites that can reach. If it's directional, They can target it by twisting it 90 degrees. I suggested that to the Verizon representative, and his response was, I'm not an RF engineer. I think it should be denied, and I think it's up to Verizon to prove that they need it. And I'm not going to say, can you hear me now, like Verizon does. Thank you.
And I can respond to that. If we do the straight denial, it'll be back. And it'll be back in roughly the same location. We've done you no service. We need, really, we don't have the luxury of just looking at one neighborhood. We have to look at the whole city. That's our obligation. And as such, if they can show, for example, if the independent engineer shows a need, then it is incumbent upon us to find the best place in our city using all considerations, not just, again, the penetration of the signal, but the people in the vicinity as well. So we don't have the luxury of just saying no this time. It will be back, and you will not be able to really rest until we've answered independently, A, is there a need? And B, if there is a need, what are our alternatives?
Then you must also include Grand Forks. And if you're going to be true to our citizens, and if what you're saying is that they're going to continue to come back, and it ends up in litigation, you have to prove, they're going to have to prove that Grand Forks was considered as well. You cannot take the baby sister and put everything on them. It has to be their engineering reports that need to be reviewed and analyzed. I personally don't think it's necessary. Hence my Caterpillar bulldozer example, because you can skew your statistics, you can skew it the way you want.
That's where the independent agency comes in. They can consider the whole region, the whole market, and come up with an unbiased result.
I contacted Grand Forks Planning, trying to get a map of the cell tower locations within the city of Grand Forks. They did not have one on their GIS. They did tell me to contact 911. It's hard to get a hold of 911 because they kind of have other duties and not just to, sit down and meet with me on cell tower access. I could obtain that. I would be hard pressed to ask an independent engineer to have Verizon pay the money to study all of Grand Forks and where it would be needed there as well. They could look at the perimeter.
Exactly.
What I'm asking them to do is to tell us if there are areas in East Grand Forks that are lacking service, because that's really what they're stating, is that there are areas that are lacking data service. And they say that this is location that would serve those needs. Now, we need to know where those areas are possibly lacking from an independent person, and that if there is an area in the vicinity, not all of Grand Forks or East Grand Forks, but in that vicinity that's not covered. It could be in Grand Forks.
It could spill over to Grand
In
Forks
which
per
case,
se,
we
yes.
could ask them to look at those areas to see if that would in fact cover East Grand Forks. But I don't think a study of both communities, it would be difficult to ask them to pay for that.
It has to be coverage for us, and then that perimeter that could come in.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
yep.
I disagree with that. I'm sorry to cut everybody off, but I disagree with that. You then also have to take a look at T-Mobile, AT&T, because this could be an equipment malfunction. It could be their technology is not up to the other cell phone providers. So if we have coverage by everybody else, and Verizon's lacking and they don't have it, should not be our problem. We don't know the answer to that question either.
I'm just asking about radio frequency. I'm not asking about specific companies' radio frequency. So.
Okay, Mr. Demers.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. President. I guess, just to clarify too, at the planning and zoning, it was a 5-2 vote to recommend. I did speak to a couple of the members that voted to move it on to the council after, and I don't know if Mike wants to speak to it too, but some of what they had expressed to me were that they would like to have the city go forward with the feasibility study to prove it, I guess, or prove that there is a need, and that because that was voiced as part of the minority report, if you will, or the minority opinion, that they were more comfortable going forward with a recommendation to get it to this level. So just so everybody knows what was kind of coming out of planning and zoning. It wasn't like everybody was, this is the way to go and we should go it. I think there was some, let's pass the buck to the council and let's see what they can do. And like I said, I think a lot of it, at least 2 other members that voted in the affirmative were suggesting to me that they wanted to go forward. They did it with the understanding that we would do some sort of feasibility. But to play a little bit of a devil's advocate to start, is that the problem we have right now is that this is definitely a privately held business. It's for profit, but because of the way that our economy is built and our society is built and our culture is built, it acts as a quasi-public utility. And yes, it isn't a public utility, but we need it. We need, people need it for their livelihood, for their communication, all those other things. So we do have to, in some sense, maintain. We don't want to become a data desert either in East Grand Forks, and that's happening all over the state of Minnesota, all over places in North Dakota where cities can't grow. People don't want to move there because they don't have access to these things. What someone said the other day is, if you go to a house, the first thing you should do is check your signal in that house, because if it's bad, you don't want to live there because you're going to be fighting it for a while. So it goes to the point that, and I don't want to get into, no offense, Gerard, but I don't want to get into the ethics of the real estate business, but they can spin the value of a property any way they want to sell a house or whatever. So I'm just saying there's a downside to not allowing a private business to do this quasi-public utility. It's for at least, I guess, another half-life of mine, we're going to be in an increasingly wireless, data-driven economy, environment, culture, society, all those things. So we can push back against that and say we're not going to do anything, or we can try to work with it. And I think we want that. And I don't think any of the residents want to live in that area either. But like I said, we have to be mindful of that. And when we look at the special use permit, there's guidelines we have to follow. And, if we don't, it becomes, there's other problems, ethical problems with how we cite these. If we decide that these are unsightly in these environment, then they're unsightly, and they're unsightly everywhere, in my opinion. And it doesn't matter if it's behind a $300,000 house or a $150,000 house. It's unsightly. And if someone loses $10,000 of their property value, or someone loses $1,000 of property value, if that's what we're finding, then that's what we're finding, and that's the decision we're making. So I guess I just want to make sure that we understand at least the logic that we have to take going forward. And it's not that I want to put it right here. It's just that we have to be very mindful of the precedent we set and the reason and the rationale for that. Like I said, this is a group that's pretty politically connected and able to, they can hire an attorney pro bono. And not every
really?
Neighbor,
Ron, you know me, I don't back
not every neighborhood in town is going to have that ability. And I think that's part of, I don't want to put words into people on the planning and zoning committee's mouths, but that was one of their concerns is, if you decide this isn't where it's going to go somewhere else, that they're not going to have, the capacity to fight back in this way. And that's fine. And that's why, I talked at that meeting about the need for this feasibility study. And I think it's the right approach, because I think when I looked at the maps, and just to clarify, this isn't a connectivity problem, so if you have 4 bars, that's not the problem. What they're trying to do is they're trying to increase their bandwidth, not their connectivity. So they're increasing the size of the pipe, is what they're trying to do. And what they're doing is, if you look at a map of where the towers that they're bouncing these off of, there's one north of town, there's one in Industrial Park, and there's one just right by the fairgrounds in Grand Forks. It makes like a triangle. This spot is almost right in the middle of that triangle. And what they're doing is then those signals go back and forth, and it just allows for more bandwidth, right? You can fit more data. And as we, in our houses, on our phones, on our tablets, all those things, as we watch more videos, we watch more of this, that's where they're seeing they need to add service. It's not that you can't connect to your phone necessarily in a certain neighborhood. It's that they're finding a bottleneck of where
You can go a quarter mile north.
you can't, though, because here's the problem is, as you go north, there's a tower that's right there, and as we've gone from 3G to 4G to 5G to 6. As you do that, those wavelengths get more amplified, but they get shorter, right? Yeah, so they don't go as far, so you need more in between, right? It's kind of like the difference between AM and FM, right? AM goes forever because it's big and stronger, but the FM, it's a little bit better, but you can't get it as far. So that's kind of what they're doing. They're trying to jam it into another thing. So they're trying to find that thing. And like I said, I don't know if that's the perfect spot. What I did pull off of those maps is that it doesn't appear that they're taking into account what's going on at 20th and 3rd. So that's what I would like them to address. And I think it's not perfectly right in the middle of that triangle, but it's close enough, I think, that they would be able to share some of that load off there if they used it in their propagation study, is what I believe. Because even when you look at the report and the mapping that Buell put out, if you put it in the Valley, park or former clubhouse space, there's some spots that have lower, you get some of those light blue spots that are actually closer to like closer by Pioneer Court or somewhere over there, that they actually get worse. So like I said, it doesn't seem like it's taking into account. So I guess that's just kind of my pitch for going forward with the feasibility study. I think it's the best way to go. As far as screening, and when we think about this, yes, the trees are 45 feet there. We live in East Grand Forks. I mean, we don't have 100-foot trees anywhere. I mean, really, we don't. And you look on 20th and 3rd, there's no trees around that one. I mean, and this one is closer to a bunch of houses than that one. I mean, there's maybe some kitty corner on the corner of that one, but I'm just saying, if we're going to have a 65-foot pole, there's not going to be trees that are anywhere in East Grand Forks. It just isn't. So I get the point that you want to have it screened, but it's not going to be that way. So, and then I guess to the point of who's for this, I don't know. Or I do. I mean, the applicant is the Valley Golf Course, and whether they're going to text the neighborhood, say that they're not for it. If they're not for it, pull the application. I mean, if that's really what they want. So they might be telling you that they're not for it, but until they pull the application, it's an action versus words thing to me. So, like I said, I would look at feasibility of what's out there, and maybe there's somewhere that the city can put it that would be of better service and easier on neighbors, I guess. So, thank you.
Mayor?
I'd like to take this opportunity to say thank you to our planning staff and to say thank you to our planning commission. To the chair of that, I walked in and razzed him right away as I came in, but I hope you know that was for fun, because the work that they do is very strategic. They try to really weigh the pros and cons of something and try to do the right thing according to a lot of the parameters and guidelines that we've given them as to what's the right way to process this decision and to come up with a decision that's fair and equitable. And they work really hard to do it. They don't get a lot of thanks for it, so this is me publicly saying thank you for serving on that commission. And to all of our boards and commissions, I came from our Friends of the Library group, and they're a happy bunch doing work for literacy and all the library stuff. So thank you. Sometimes in the middle of one of these, that is lost. It's a big deal. It's really important, the work that you do to set the table, really to start the conversation, and we continue that on from here. Thank you.
I'd like to make one more comment closing. One thing that a lot of people don't realize, I incorporated the golf course. They bought 20 acres. There wouldn't be a golf course if it wasn't for the city of East Grand Forks. Now, here's the pitch. If they think that we're treating them badly, the truth of the matter is the land that's owned by the city, the golf course is paying $1 a year, and they will not have to pay any more unless we need the space. The space that's been designed is for 8,000 graves. Now we have smaller graves for cremation, so it's probably designed for 9,000 graves. And I think we've got over 1,500 commitments. It's close to 1,600 graves used now. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't have the numbers.
Yeah, I think that's about it. But we wouldn't, what I'm trying to say is the city has given those people quite an opportunity. The golf people started with 20 acres. They bought it from a railroad man where the houses are today, and they took and he lived in Grand Forks. They paid $20,000. Now, I can tell you more things about it. People have tried to stop us from building a cemetery, too. I think some of you would enjoy what I tell you. I'll quit talking.
Anybody else have any comments at this time? So I guess the question is, do you move it on? And if you move it on, or you don't move it on? You already know where my vote is. I'm not moving it on personally, so.
You're not moving it
No,
on?
I'm not going to move it on.
No, my question
I'm not
is.
saying, I want to know what they want to do.
Oh.
I personally saying I don't want to move it on for a vote to approve the special.
Oh.
That's me.
You.
Okay?
So you
That's
don't.
that's what you want, right?
No, that's all I'm asking is it going to go to the 21st for a formal vote?
I know, that's what I'm saying.
So you're not?
I don't want to.
Okay.
So that's my
He's getting the opinion of the council.
opinion of the council.
Oh, okay. I was
Mr.
confused
Vetter?
there.
Well, at some point, it has to go to the council to vote it up or down. I mean, you can't just say, we're not going to move it on, we're not going to move it on. This meeting here tonight, we don't take votes. So you
I know
can't
that,
even
but I'm just telling you
poll
my.
people. I mean,
If we have 7 people on the council and 4 people don't want to move it on, it doesn't move on.
Well,
We would have
I'm just
to.
saying.
the issue that you run into is
I
the
understand
60-day
that.
rule.
Yes, we would have to approve or deny within 60 days, or it's automatically
I
approved.
understand that, but
So,
I'm just saying.
okay.
it's-
Just making sure that we at least vote on it at some point.
And what does everybody wishes, move it on as presented or in different fashion? What do you want to do?
Mr. Vetter's point, the work session is designed so we can get feedback from people, study the issue, sleep on it a couple of nights, and then vote on it. We are not required to make a decision tonight. Put it up for a vote, we can vote it up or down. I do feel that a study is a reasonable way to move forward, and whether or not we have to vote on approval or denial next week, I don't know if we do, but.
If you vote to approve or deny next week without the study, and you make that decision, and then you want the study later, Verizon's not going to pay for it. So if you vote to do the study and hold off on the decision with an extension of the 60-day rule, we can get Verizon to pay for it, because that's in our ordinance. But if you vote to deny it and then want the study afterwards, Verizon's not going to pay for it. They're just going to walk away.
Delay a vote and ask for a study and then.
You can delay the vote.
The only way Verizon's gonna step forward is if you give them this.
If we require them to do it, we can make them pay for it. But if we vote on it to approve or deny, the study then becomes independent at our dime. So, and that's up to you. If you feel that it's, something that the city wants to, I'm just suggesting that why would we pay for it if we could get Verizon to pay for it and we hire the independent engineer? So.
I'm not gonna vote to approve until I see the results of the study.
And I hope you all understand when I talk about the importance of a study, it is to protect this neighborhood and to protect every neighborhood. And I like your view and I share it, as we're going to treat everyone in this community equally. And that means really being considerate of every home all across the spectrum.
Mr. Powers.
Mr. Chairman, I think Mark hit it on the head, because we had more discussion after the meeting and out in the parking lot and on the phone, and I think I'm speaking for the commission as a whole, is that we would like to see the study. I think that'll solve a lot of problems, because, I've listened to 2.5 hours of this now, my meeting and your meeting, and there's a lot of miscommunication and a lot of inaccuracies, and I wish Verizon would have been here with their tech guys, and they never have.
And Eddie Buell is a real estate. That's his job. Is he looks for discusses locations to rent. He knows nothing about radio frequency. They have their own engineer, and so obviously Eddie's going to be in favor of the location that he picked out. That's his job. You're not going to get a different point of view from Eddie. So that's why we're lacking engineers. I know nothing about radio frequency, and I will never begin to discuss that. So
again, I would say that the commission would strongly favor the study.
So does everybody want to vote to require the study? We'd have to vote on it next week to require the study?
yes, and extend the 60 days until the study's done.
Is that what your wishes are, Mr. Vetter?
That would be my wishes, yes.
Mr. Repel?
I'd like to see the study, because I'd like to know in the future where we could put one.
Or if
Being
we
at
need
this
one.
location.
Yeah.
We might not even need one.
I think I already know where Mr. Demers is at, right? Correct?
Whatever, better.
Yeah. Okay. That's what's going on then. So bring it forth next week for that. Do you have to put them on notice of that, of the 60 days after the vote next week or before?
We will send them a formal letter after the.
We'll have to do a written formal letter. Essentially, we have 90 days for the study to be completed. We would have to give them a written notice before the 60 days, which I believe is about 30 days from now. And then hopefully we can have the study completed by then. If not, we would have to either get them to request an additional time frame for it to be completed. We'd have to negotiate it, or we'd have to put it for a vote, yes or no.
So the question I have, could at any time planning and zoning put this recommendation forth with the study instead of the way it was presented?
Go back to the planning commission and
No,
have them
at this
recommend?
time, today, bringing this forth, could the planning and zoning recommended the study be done and not?
No,
Okay, that's my question.
no.
Okay, anybody else have anything on this matter? Okay, thank you, everybody showed up and spoke. Move on to number 2, year-end summary of Red River State Recreation Area activity. In 2 minutes.
I already told the golf course, if the city wants to donate some land at the tower north where it belongs, I'll do the least work and the least for free. We already covered that.
Thank you very much. Is that a cell tower?
Yeah.
Too fresh.
It's like a, yeah, like a, you know, like a kiosk thing. Yeah.
Okay, well, first of all, I'd like to thank you guys for inviting me. I just typed this up quick this afternoon, so there's probably a lot of spelling errors or typos, but I make it brief. We did open.
Yeah, speak up a little bit.
Oh, sorry.
That will magnify you. That was just first reading.
Okay. I have to speak up louder for you guys?
Yes.
Really? Husband tells me I'd speak too loud. Okay, we opened up early this year. We opened up April 21st, and we just closed actually on Sunday. It's the first year of extended season. It's already set to be the same dates pretty much for the next 2 years, except for the opening early. We have to wait and see what winter brings. We can, or I've already got it okayed to open April 15th if everything's good to go and we got campers that want to go in there. Otherwise, we don't open until the first week of May. Attendance, we were up again, even with all the bridge construction and even the Canadian dollar being down. It's an increase of 130 sites over last year. And we go by how many sites were rented versus how many people actually stayed overnight in the campground. So that's over 26,000 people in the campground. That's quite a bit. I know the summer went really fast. And then I have some examples there. I was asked kind of how many Canadians visit versus other states. And these 2 weekends were I just pulled up from the attendance weekends that we were, well, of course, we were like Friday, August the 18th, there was only one site left in the campground that wasn't rented. So it just kind of gives you the numbers there. And then, yeah, neither of these were holiday weekends. And Friday night for that weekend, if we probably looked to see what was at River Raceway, that's probably why we were so busy, because Friday nights are crazy busy just for the racers, for the people coming in for the racing. Things I'd never even thought about before, They come from all over, so. And our camper or tenter that came from the farthest away this year would have to be a tenter. He was riding on his bicycle, and he was from Spain. He did not ride from Spain, of course, because everybody, I think he, but he got on, I can't remember where he said actually, up in Canada. And he was continuing, he just stayed one night, and then he was continuing on down into South Dakota and Colorado and going all the way to California for some reason. So that was kind of interesting. We had visitors from China. They didn't camp, but they were just visitors, and they were fascinated with the size of the cottonwood trees we have. So that was kind of cute. Kind of hard to understand them. I couldn't figure out where they were from. They had to write down. So there's always, many different people that we have contact with. We were short-staffed. This year, there was a total with me was just 6 workers. But there was a lot of cross-training with the park workers. 4 to 5 were cross-trained so that we could close the office and put up a sign, we're out in the campground. Come find us if you need to pay for your site or if you have any questions. And that works out very well. The biggest thing is trying to get people on board with the new reservation system, that there is a phone right outside the office that they can call themselves and make a reservation or go online. But they still want an actual person. They don't want to just do it over the phone. They want to have somebody there. So, so we're still kind of working on that with signage, things like that. Otherwise, they just wait for you. You run to the bank, you come back, you got 6 campers there. So, otherwise, yeah. So we did a lot of the work with the invasive species this year on the park staff. We didn't have as much time to work on some of that, but we did improvements on the Eagle Point boat ramp, or the boat landing down there. A lot of problems with people just tearing it up as soon as you get a load of gravel in there and Public Works spreads it out for us. They just love to go and destroy it. Just missed catching one yesterday that was down there. Even with the snow, they're still tearing it up. Hopefully it's thawing enough where the gravel pile that we'd had 2 loads of gravel dumped that was supposed to be spread, but there was some work on the bike trails, so Strata had their equipment down there, so now we just have a frozen pile of gravel. The program and events, we had 14 of them that were scheduled. 5 were requested. We have the, kind of like I showed you the pictures last year, we had the geocache and the archery, astronomy, birds and blooms, and moon and bats. Bats is actually one that's really popular. They're actually kind of fascinating when you start learning about them. So if you guys are, and these events and programs are free to the whole community. Anybody, that wants to come, if you guys are interested, come on over and learn about some bats. Don't have to worry about the mosquitoes then. Because I found out a bat can eat like 8,000 mosquitoes in one night, over even more than that. It depends on the size of the bat, I guess, how hungry he is. The groups requesting the programs are the YMCA Adventure Camp and the Girl Scouts, and then we had some requests from the Grand Forks Library this year to do geocache programs. The campground also hosted Pedal for a Purpose. It was the 2nd annual event, and that benefits the Sunshine Hospitality Home. And we'll be having that again this year. We want to try to get more word out about it. Some people, don't know about it till that day, and to get more people to come to it. I also was involved in helping with the officers down the 5K to get the Homeland Security helicopter okayed. That was fun, right, Megan?
It was very worthwhile. The kids loved it.
It was. It was just, yep, it was interesting, but it worked out very well. It was a really nice turnout for that, too. That's always good. We have the volunteers this year for this North Dakota School for the Blind and the YMCA Adventure Camp. The North Dakota School for the Blind had actually wanted to do some overnight camping, and that was set up where my staff would help, whatever they needed, and we were kind of looking forward to it, but it just, one of the children is just a little bit, too nervous, I guess, put it, and so they had to cancel that and just camp at the school, but they still wanted to come over to the park. They wanted to volunteer, so it's just like the YMCA Adventure Camp. They volunteered, and they come and pick up branches. And it was actually kind of a really fun afternoon. We just had, for the school, we just had them right around the playground there. But a good group of kids. They had asked a lot of questions about the park. So enforcement issues. We do have some problems with the trespassing after hours, after maybe the bar closes. We didn't have any major incidences this year. We just had the one trespassing what the police department helped us out with. Otherwise, for the staff, our enforcement issues are the firewood violations, the permit violations, and then the no alcohol rule in the campground. Let's see, then the small project funds for this year. We got trees and shrubs planted in the campground. And Reid's worker, John, he came over with Bobcat with the auger on it, so that helped a lot. I think we only hand dug about 4 holes instead of having to do 28, because it was really, the trees came right when it was the hottest, driest time this year, so we wanted to get them in the ground right away, so that really helped. The state also approved that we have speed bumps. I don't know if anybody's seen the speed bumps in front of the office there. I thought there'd be a lot of complaints about the campers or trailers going over them. There was no complaints, and actually a lot of people were thankful, because when they come down the walkway on their side of the dike to go over to the restaurants or the movies, it is a safety issue, because if people are speeding through, they don't stop at the stop sign at the office there. So that's a lot safer for everybody crossing, so they can go downtown or whatever they're doing. So, and then the picture on your handout there is a picture of the bike tune-up station that was purchased by the state trail program. And the reason I kind of put this, I like pictures anyways, but I put this picture on because I was very pleased with how it turned out. Of course, the state paid for the tune-up station, but we were having problems with who was going to pour the gravel and or the concrete, I'm sorry, and how much that was going to cost, and it could cost up to, you know, $1,300 and all of that. Well, at the end, the project cost $56, which was bags of sand for underneath the concrete. The pad was donated by Concrete Inc., the 4x4 pad that they might have just scrapped. It always helps to have a big family, and my brother works there, so he does a lot of the moldings for a lot of the buildings, and so they were like, yep, just give it to her. And they actually delivered it and placed it for us, too. So kind of proud of that when, you know, people pitch in like that. I do owe him, I suppose, but feed him with some food. Otherwise, some project proposals for next year, the pothole repair in the campground. Try to get those done. There was a estimate done of $132,000, I think. Reid and I discussed maybe trying to break it up a little bit, so maybe just do this worst section one year, and so we'll work on that, see what we can get the state to cover. And then other project proposals that have been turned in is signage in the campgrounds. We found out when we have 109 sites in the campground, but if you're looking for where to go and to get to your sites, there's only 3 signs, and one is from like 1 to 20. They only go up to 72. They've never been added. As we've added sites, nothing's been added. My staff and I have just had made some for the walk-in sites. That helps, but otherwise there just isn't any directional signs in there. We have a lot of complaints about people that want to come to the campground, but they can't figure out how to get there because of where it's kind of located. So we need some better signage on the highways. And then we need to start replacing a lot of the trees that we keep losing. We had to have a lot cut down this year again, so try to make it quack fast there. So.
May I have any questions for Catherine?
Are we closing in on Itasca?
Yeah. No. No. I think we passed other ones again, but nope, we'll never catch Itasca. So.
I hear that this is one of the very successful efforts in our state recreation, state park system. So thank you for you and your people's involvement in making it the success that it is.
Thank you.
Anybody else have anything?
So I'd also like to thank Catherine for the cooperation that she has with us and our staff, and with Reid and the other department heads. I think it's a relationship that's seen rotten times in the past, and I just really think we're in a good place right now. Thanks for making this report, and look forward to next year.
Thank you. Yep, thanks, I have it on the bottom, thanks to all the departments, to Reid staff, and Public Works, Jeremy King is awesome.
Charlotte?
Just very quickly, I want to thank you for working with the library, too. You were a big hit with the kids and Andrea.
Okay, that was fun.
Thank you, ma'am.
There's a lot of favorable comment downtown, the way this place is being managed, and any way we can help her, we should. The one thing I think that the council should talk about with the fire chief, we should try to get a safety deal down there for storms. And Mr. Mayor, it's a good job for you to grab with the fire chief and get the interpretive center that Jesse Ventura vetoed. Lynn Strauss had a package all set up, but we've got to get something down there for safety of people in the event of a storm. So
Reid will help too.
yeah, he's got to be involved. But well, she get put in a box with a storm. You know, I mean, people got to. The closer you are, the better. Because what would happen is probably downtown there would get filled up, you know, from across the street and everything else. So, but I think that should be a high priority for the city. We've got some responsibility to have safety here in the event of a storm. We've got safety up in the Civic Center for people, in the trailer court as an illustration in that area. We've had tornadoes here, not too far away from where we are at Riverbend. It hit out right west of the river, right by the riverbend. We could see it. Jumped over by Thompson, didn't do any damage.
It can be really hard to camp in heavy
Yeah,
wind
well,
and rain.
You remember that,
thunderstorms.
don't
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
not good. Yeah, we'll get to work on that.
Yeah, we did evacuate 3 times this year, and we can have up to 300 people in the campground. And when we go over to the fire hall, we are in their little training room, and if there is a actual emergency where they have to do work, there is no place for anybody. So, thank you.
Thank you again. Number 3, discussion of potential park advisory board. Reid, Huttunen.
Thank you, Mr. President. A couple times throughout the last year when I've had various things on work session agendas, whether it be organizational charts or discussion on arenas, we've talked a little bit about a potential parks advisory board. So I've worked with Mr. Olsted a little bit in putting together kind of a proposal of what a parks advisory board could look like for the community and the duties and responsibilities that it could carry. I started it out with going to our city charter, just information for you all, to our city charter to use some of the dialogue that is in the charter advising how a parks board could be organized. And then used a few examples from other communities. The one example that I found that I seem to take more of a liking to is the city of Moorheads. They have a very descriptive and detailed Parks and Recreation policy manual that includes the Parks Advisory Board, how it's organized, what its responsibilities are, how often it meets, the whole 9 yards. So other communities certainly have them as well, but that was one that this seems to mirror more closely than the others. So just, I think more than anything, just to put it in front of you as an example of what it could look like if we wanted to go forward with organizing one, with the new year coming soon. A few things for discussion, I think, could be how often the board meets, what we want its duties and responsibilities to be if we organize it, certainly how the initial board is appointed and the length of terms for those people. So just really leave it up for discussion for any of you to have questions or to make comments on it.
Just say how we work out the details, bringing it into compliance with the charter and whatnot. I sure like the idea. Charlotte and I visited a little bit also as I was on my way over here tonight. She said she'd just be lost without her advisory boards to bounce stuff off of, you know, check it out in the community, bring information, report back. She'd feel kind of out on an island without that. And so if it comes forward as a recommendation from the council, I'd sure say I'd support the idea of having an advisory board inside to our Parks and Rec.
Mr. Vetter.
Thank you, Mr. President. Originally, when I saw this and I was thinking back, and I thought Mr. Tweeten and I were probably the only ones on the council back when we had committees. And then I look around here, and the mayor and our city attorney probably were on the council when we had committees. The problem that we had back then was that the council became a rubber stamp. The committee would bring something to council, and if the council would ask any questions, it was, how dare you ask a question, just approve what we brought to you, and let's move on. And so the council got away from committees and went to this council as a whole to do what the committees were doing. Are there other committees that we could get rid of? Probably. But I, for one, don't want to go back to individual committees for every department around the city and just have them make recommendations to the city council. That's our job.
Anybody else have any comments? Mr. Demers.
Thank you, Mr. President. I guess I certainly can understand that aspect, and I promise I won't be a rubber stamp if this goes through. And I guess the opposite effect is that too much, maybe not power, or too much information, or too much concentration gets put into just the council. And what I think or would hope that this does is adds another layer of communication, another layer of vetting that, like I said, doesn't necessarily mean a rubber stamp. Case in point, planning and zoning just kind of said that they recommend something. We're like, wait, we're going to do a feasibility study, and I bet if we didn't do the feasibility stuff, it would probably be close to a no vote. So I'm not as fearful of that. I guess I didn't go through that, so I don't know what it was like. So I'll take your word for it, or anybody else's word for it that was there. But I do, when I remember back to what we talked about in our visioning sessions, one of the things we talked about was engagement and talking to people, and getting more people involved. And I think the benefit, and I think it's a net benefit too. It isn't just a benefit that's equal to. I think there is an overall benefit to getting more people involved. And one thing I would recommend is, I know you have kind of laid out maybe a ward by ward thing. That would work. I would think there might be some merit to having an overlay or simultaneous meeting of some sort of a TAC group on top of that. So making sure that you have representatives of the various stakeholders that are out there too, whether it's the Greenway folks, whether it's, the figure skating folks, whether it's the hockey folks or baseball folks, having them be maybe not a voting member of that board, but you're strongly encouraged to attend those and be involved in that for two reasons. Number one, it's a more constant reminder, and there's flows of information that can go two ways, I think. So that would be my only additional kind of comment right now is to have that sort of a technical, or they aren't necessarily technical, but a stakeholder, an alternate stakeholder list or groups that should be included in those meetings. And like I said, I wouldn't necessarily make them voting members, but I would make them strongly encouraged to attend, I guess.
Just to piggyback on that, you could designate different ex officio members that you would like to have.
Sure.
Whether it's the Blue Line Club, the Home Run Club. Just
Absolutely.
a convention that would have a place at the table for comment.
Yep, absolutely. I would support something with that type of language.
I'll get you to the next question for you then is, according to our charter, if I'm correct, it does say that the members have to be from each ward. Doesn't say anything else in there. Do we have to follow that charter to a T of who's on there? Because that was, when we started discussing that, that was a question that we had on that back.
I guess I'd have to go back and look at it, but as long as they're non-voting members, I don't think that would be any type of a violation of our charter to have other groups that could lend input.
Because the original discussion, and Mike, I'll get to you, sorry.
No problem.
Original discussion that we had with Reid and I was, in fact, that the stakeholders in the community, the people that are involved with the rec and recreation department, and who uses our facilities and who is involved with us, even with your comments, be working with our wellness program that we have with organizations. So it's something that was a discussion that Reid and I had, that we have a lot of things going forth that we need to get done with their community and our recreation. This is an idea to get those people who are the stakeholders, who do use the facilities, are part of a advisory to say we should, maybe we should do this. No, they're not going to be the voting members. No, they're not going to be able to tell us what to do. That was a discussion that we had. That's why we're saying, no, this is something that we're bringing. We think this would be great. Can we do it this way? This is not they're going to say this is the way it's going to be. So that was a discussion that we had to make sure. We talked about the Blue and Clive home run club, skating club, just different people in the community and groups in the community that have a stake in it. And that's why with us moving forth and looking at things down the road, to have that voice of the community together, to work together and bring stuff forth of, helping Reid out, helping Mark out, and whoever. So that was the reasoning behind it, that we have something that we started here in the last, was it 2 years now, All True came on? Wellness for the city is something that we want to keep growing and keep, making our community, have that feel from a recreation point that attracts people to come here, that we have that opportunities. So that was the premise for looking at this and wanting to do something. So, but Mike, sorry.
No problem. I do see the value in this, and I do understand the concerns that Mr. Vetter has. I wasn't on the council back then, but I was paying attention. I attended a lot of meetings, and I was a witness to the exact problems that did arise from the committee system that we had, and we would have a council member assigned to a committee for a long time, and that became his empire, and anybody that challenged that had a fight. And I see a system like this where you have 2 council members on a board as a little bit different. I do think that having a limit of terms could address that, so you don't serve more than 2 2-year terms or 6 years total or whatever. And having 2 members is also, I think, a guard against that. That's what we have with all of our commissions, with one exception, which I think should be changed, but we can talk about that during the commission discussion. But so I do support this. I do have, sure, the same concerns that Mr. Vetter has, but I also think that having a board give the kind of time to all of the different issues that come up. I mean, it's pushing 7 o'clock tonight. We've only got 4 items on our agenda here, and the later it gets, the less our attention spans are. And I want to go home and watch The Walking Dead, but but anyway, my point is that I do support this. I think it'd be valuable with the cautionary things in mind, that we don't go back to the bad old days of the committee system.
Mr. Reapel, then I'll go down to Charlotte. You need a microphone.
I have the unique situation that my brother is a park and rec director, and he values the advisory board because they give him some very valid ideas. What he makes it clear to him is that this is an advisory board. I have to bring it to the council approves and has final say on everything. Sometimes they forget that, and they think it's going to be run through, and he comes back and says, no, council said no, now we have to plan something else. But he does value the fact that they give him some good ideas, and that's the big thing, is to give him some ideas to move on with everything.
Charlotte?
I am one of the fortunate departments that has to have a library board per state statutes. And so when the commissions and the committees went away, the board stayed. We also have a Friends of the Library Board. And between the two of them, they have representatives on each. We try to have the schools represented. We try to have all the different departments or areas of the city represented and age groups. And there are many times that not only do they give me good ideas, sometimes they say, you know, you're kind of stuck in a rut, why don't you try something different? I don't get that from the city council necessarily. I see a lot more of library board members and Friends of the Library Board involved in the actual day-to-day operations of the library, not the council members. So they come forward with ideas, we beat it up, we work it out, we come up with some numbers, and then we come here and we give you that information. We know you get the final say, not a debate. So it works really well for the library.
Mayor Gander?
I had your same thought, Clarence, when they thought of bringing back the Park Advisory Board. I chuckled in my mind because we worked so hard to make it a committee of the whole. And the way I've come around to support it is, in the old days, the recommendation from the board would come to the full council, and I was on the council at that same time with you. And that's where it felt like more of a rubber stamp, because in that chamber, we don't have this kind of rigorous debate, but in here we do. So if the findings of that advisory group come to this table, where we really are free to flesh it out as much as we want, that's where I came around and said, you know what, that might be the best of both. He gets the sounding board, we get a chance to really familiarize ourselves with the issue before we have to vote.
Mr. Gulston?
And I was just on the same wavelength as Mr. Mayor Gander, was that the difference between the two potentially is you have this council as a whole as a buffer before it goes to just the council, so that they come to you with their ideas. Here you can flush it out with the entire group, as opposed to previously there was like 3 people and then they brought it to the council, and then we were almost at the time had very limited information and were just asked to essentially, like you said, rubber stamp it and approve. And I think if you put this extra layer on there, you do have some of that protection from just turning it into a rubber stamp. But that was the first thing when Reid said something to me too, as went through my head, was the old committee system.
Reid?
Thank you. I'll try to respond to everybody's comments a little bit, just on a few of the thoughts I have with it. The first, to Mr. Vetter, and I think in reading through the duties, I hope that it portrays my thought on it a little bit, but the really important thing that I tried to get through with this, and even in visiting with Mr. Olstead about it, was that it's to use the term boots on the ground a little bit, so to speak, is I really want some, I think, allies in the community that are in the buildings, that are participating in the activities, that have children that are still doing that, can pull the field and visit with people and get a recommendation or get a sense of where are we today and where do we want to be. That we can bring that back to an advisory meeting and say, okay, you know, we don't have a great severe weather policy right now. We don't have a great way to communicate that to people. We have a storm, and when the storm is going to come through town 10 minutes away, I mean, we're sending people in cars running to baseball fields to say, lightning is 5 minutes away, all activities are canceled. We can improve on that, and that's something that the city council shouldn't have to do the real deep layered work to figure it out, how we're going to do it. But if I have another sounding board outside of just myself and Mr. Dragich in our office that can look at whether it be a text alert that we could use the city's current resources to do it, or it could be, something through our website, those sorts of things that we could bounce it off of, and have somebody poke some holes in it before it comes to your group. It may just, like Mr. Pokshavinsky said, it may save everybody a little bit of time, but still, even as Mr. Riopel said, making it very clear through this that these are recommendations, obtain input, provide input to the city council to let the city council hopefully make a more informed decision. I think to the idea, Mr. Demers, of the Blue Line clubs, the home run clubs, the arts and crafts community being involved in it, one way, and Mr. Gallstead, you'd probably have to provide some input on how we could do it, but the Greenway Committee that we meet monthly on, and that Mr. Pokshavinsky's a part of, we meet every other month. 1 month, it's just basically the voting board members of that group. It's each city, it's the city of Grand Forks, the city of East Grand Forks, the Grand Forks Park District, and the DNR. Those are the 4 voting parties of that group that all go to those meetings. The next month then, it's considered basically a users meeting. So anyone that has an interest or a use of the Greenway as a whole can come to that meeting with ideas or interests or things that we can try. So even if we wanted to have a monthly meeting, we could potentially set it up in that way, that 1 month it's we could have a designated list of anybody that's considered a user, and that could label all those groups to have an interest in it. And the next month, if there's something that just the ward, the member from each ward and the 2 council members need to be there and really roll up the sleeves and go to work on something, they could do it in that setting. So that's just a few of my thoughts.
Okay, Mr. Demers.
One last thing. To the point about the fear of the rubber stamp, I guess, while that is a concern, I guess my bigger concern with going to the committee is that the deliberations and the details of what goes on gets lost and shoved into a committee. I think that's a bigger fear or a bigger potential problem, but I guess I think we should address how we do any of our meetings. Maybe we should require all of our boards to be on on our camera system or whatever. That way we would have, I don't know if there might be some boards that are going to push back on that, but I guess that would be one way that we could maybe alleviate that fear. And yeah, these aren't elected people necessarily, but that's kind of one of the perceptions I wouldn't want to have, because what we're trying to do is engage people, and all of a sudden now, we've got this board of the Blue Line Club, the Figure Skating Club, all the power players or whatever in town, and they're just going to get this stuff in, rubber stamp it, and it's done. We definitely want to try to make sure that we're transparent in our deliberations throughout. And like I said, that is engaging. It allows people that aren't necessarily going to maybe file for office, get their feet into city government, figure out what's going on, input what's going on, and potentially maybe she could come and take my spot at the council. That would be my hope, is that we're developing people for this spot. So, like I said, I overall I can see there's some concerns, but I think there's a net positive to doing it like this. So, thank you.
Anybody else have anything? I think you got some good discussion on it and kind of a direction where things to look at, and let's keep moving forward with it, I guess, sir.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, appreciate it. Number 4, request to fundraise for K-9 program. Chief Hedlund.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is simply just that, just a request for authorization for our department to fundraise in the idea of starting a K-9 program within our department at some point in time in the future. It's not authorization to actually start that program. Should we reach our fundraising goals, we would then come back with a formal request to actually start the program and would ask for council approval at that time. So we're purely just asking for permission to begin the fundraising program. We have considered beginning a program basically since I started with the department. They're not cheap, and I want to be upfront with that in the first place. There's a variety of expenses, and we simply have had other things, other needs that have had to be taken care of.
and that's why I have not brought this idea to you before. I have a number of staff members that are very enthusiastic about this idea, and they're convinced that they will be able to make a go of it. Several communities in our region have been able to initiate canine programs almost entirely through fundraising efforts like we're requesting permission to do. I think that a program like this could be very valuable for our community in a variety of different ways, and I guess I would be more than happy to arrange a demonstration from one of the surrounding agencies if council would like to see that. Otherwise, I guess Grand Forks has a number of dogs. We frequently use those. We do currently, as part of our drug task force, have a U.S. Border Patrol officer that has a canine. That dog is often at our department, so we have been able to use that at times. But those officers are typically assigned to our program for only about 2 years at a time, so you never know when he's going to be reassigned and how long we'll have access to that dog. Will County does not have a dog at this point in time. Marshall County just recently did have a dog. That's actually the demonstration that we had in-house for a number of our staff. That was a dog that was trained through this particular program in North Iowa Canine.
Chief, am I correct that the big difference of not having a dog is that many of your arrests are marijuana in men, and that you may just have, most people don't realize that dog will smell the marijuana, and you break up the meth, the people of meth, and there's a tremendous amount of both. Isn't that right? What you do is get rid of these people, because what's happening is I see a lot of your arrests, so I know what you're doing. But I think we should do it. It's practically a plague. There's so much of it, and we're the two cities together are big enough. They can afford to bring this garbage in from far away as China, and as I understand it, in the task force, you have about 5 Border Patrolmen working the task force?
4 Border Patrol and 1 U.S. Customs, one Homeland Security officer.
But I think the one thing is that we can get caught up and get rid of a lot of this stuff. A lot of people that you least suspect are getting involved in it, but the problem is most of these people are getting involved. They think it's an easy way to make money, and the thing is, if there's a little publicity about all the people they're picking up, and especially if they make a federal case out of it, why we can shut a lot of it off. Now, so far, you've been keeping the meth out of the schools, but any drugs, am I correct?
Well, I don't think we'd go so far as to say we have kept all the drugs out of the schools. I have no doubt there's students that are using drugs, but that's one of the goals, is to try to keep the drugs out of the schools as much as possible. That's one of the reasons that we initiated our school resource officer program. And certainly the canine program isn't going to be the be-all, end-all. It's just one more tool that we would like to have at our disposal to try to work as best we can to limit drugs, the opportunities for drugs in our community.
Mr. Paczynski.
Thank you. I guess I'm not 100% sold on the need for this. I guess I'd like to hear more. I will say I did get a call that I don't know who it was from, but they saw this was on the agenda and suggested that this is a duplication of service that may not be necessary, and I guess I need to be convinced that we need to do this as a standalone service for the East Grand Forks PD, or could we be a partner with Grand Forks or Polk County? I know fundraising for the initial startup costs is one thing, but once that's turned over to our general fund budget, it's going to be an ongoing cost for forever. And dogs like this are probably 2 or 3 years old before we get them. They live to be 10, 11, 12, or 13. I don't know how old they are before they're no longer useful. So that's an ongoing expense that I'm not sure if it's a luxury that we can afford. So I just want to play devil's advocate, not saying that I'm not going to support it when it comes right down to it, but I do want these questions answered, and want to know that the question has been raised, and that I think they're fair questions that should be answered.
Absolutely. As I mentioned, Grand Forks does have K-9 program that they are, if those officers are available, they have been more than happy to assist us and have assisted us on a number of occasions, both in tracking individuals and in sniffing for drugs. But those dogs aren't always available. Of course, our dog would not always be available either, but it would be obviously primarily available for us. So it would enhance our ability and our usage. Polk County at this point in time does not have a dog. I don't know whether they're considering taking another one on or not. It would certainly be, as Mr. Galsted just mentioned to me, perhaps because we are a member of the Pine to Trade Drug Task Force, perhaps we could look at other agencies within our task force to possibly assist us in some of the ongoing expenses. I don't want to speak for them. Certainly, we haven't even had that discussion, but that would be something we could bring up as a possibility. We certainly could look, if nothing else, we could have a discussion with Polk County Sheriff's Office to see if they would be consider partnering a program.
I would be much more inclined to support something like that, a partnership with the other agencies.
And again, we haven't had those conversations, but we certainly can look into that.
Good.
Mr. Murphy, did you have something?
I guess the only question I had is, are there I know we have Grand Forks, but in Polk County itself, are there any other cities that have a K-9, or is there no K-9 in Polk County at this time?
The only one in Polk County is from our Border Patrol officer that is part of the Drug Task Force.
Kirkston used to have some, Polk County used to have some, but the dog has since either passed or retired.
The only reason I ask that is because if it's a Minnesota dog and it says a Minnesota officer as well, I'm assuming we will probably get assist calls from close by cities for that as well.
We very well might. Norman County did directly to ourselves, recently got a dog also through the same program, and Marshall County to our north does have a program. So the two counties directly north and south of us do have programs. Thief River Falls PD also has just I don't know if they've actually acquired their dog yet, but I know they've done the fundraising along these same lines and are intending to get one if they have not already got it. So there are more dogs coming into our region. So hopefully that will, while no doubt we would receive requests for assistance, hopefully that would help soften that a little bit.
There's a very basic reason why people come through here. You got two major highways, and people are doing something illicit, any type of crime. They go into bigger communities. We're part of a bigger community. Am I correct? That simple as that.
Absolutely.
You can have some arrangement with Polk County also, but it's a big problem. And where there's marijuana, very often it's meth. You can't pick it up unless the dog picks it up. You even got that in airplanes, people scenting in the big airports.
Mr. Vedder.
Thank you, Mr. President. I echo Mr. Pukshabinsky's concerns. One of the things that I would want brought forward is what are our ongoing costs? You're going to fundraise for the startup costs, but what are we looking at as an ongoing cost year in and year out? The second thing that concerns me is the dog stays with the trainer, so if the trainer leaves our department, the dog goes with them. And with the turnover that we've had, we're going to have the dog for 2 years, 3 years, and then it's gone.
I would certainly like to think that wouldn't be the case. Any handler that we would choose, we would be requesting to give us a commitment for the usable life of that dog. But unless we were to write something up to our city attorney, perhaps, I don't know that there's anything that would be enforceable.
Anybody else have? Mr. Demers.
Thank you, Mr. President. So you don't have a fundraising goal? You don't know what your...
Well, at a minimum, before I would even come to request permission to start a program, we would have to have a minimum what I have listed in my request for council action at that $51,000 to $56,000 range.
And how would you look, or I don't remember.
Dog biscuits.
That's going to be up to my officers. I've made it quite clear to them that if they want to accomplish this, they're the ones that are going to need to do that. There are a number of grant programs around the country that do support this type of program. And Norman County and Thief River Falls, and I believe Marshall County all did it primarily through their local businesses.
Okay. So then ongoing cost, obviously, everybody's touched on that. There's.
And yes, and that we would hope that some of those businesses might be able to, if we are able to reach that original fundraising goal, perhaps some of those businesses might continue to offer assistance to keep the program afloat. But yes, and that's why I said I'm not requesting approval at this point in time. We would obviously need to give you, as a council, significantly more information than I'm presenting to you at this point in time before I would ever ask for formal permission to start the program.
Is this the number one priority of your department right now?
It's not, which is why I haven't brought it forth before. Keeping our staff, our general patrol staff fully equipped and functional, that is probably our first and foremost priority, and that's the equipment that I typically bring to you folks during a typical budget cycle. Okay. Whether it be the vehicles, in-car computers, in-car cameras, those are the types of things that are our primary priorities. That's the number one. We must be able to get out and perform the functions on a day in, day out basis. Okay, and then just for the general public, what is your intent, or what's the purpose of the dog? I mean, a lot of people watch TV, they see a lot of things. Tell the people what you envision. The three main things that these types of dogs can be used for a variety of things, but the three number one purposes in my mind would be drug detection. Would be used extensively for that. Our department, I think Mr. Dahlstead would support me on this, is very active in drug enforcement. We have high numbers of arrests, both in misdemeanor and especially in the felony level drug arrests, and this would be just one more tool that would assist us in that endeavor. And then also in the tracking both of victims, people that wandered away from home, and then suspects, people that flee from our officers. Those would be, in my opinion, the three primary uses. Dogs can be very beneficial in searching both businesses and residences. If you believe you have a suspect inside a building, it's obviously an officer safety tool in that regard, because that dog can go out and search a building much more safely than a human can. Not too long ago, not our existing dog, but the dog that our drug task force has access to, assisted our officers on a search of a business where we had a suspect that had broken into the home. And just the threat of that dog convinced that person to come out and give themselves up without our officers having to put themselves in harm's way. So on those, and maybe we can start with each of them and talk about it, but so if you're looking for a perpetrator that's in a building or hidden in somewhere, what's the frequency that happens? It's not common, to be very honest with you. Perhaps once a month. I wouldn't guess it's much more than that. That you'd be sending a dog into a building or something to get some. And at any time in the past, have you not been able to use the Grand Forks? Or yes, there's been a number of times where we've requested and they haven't had anybody available. It's not common. I would say it's not common that we request their dogs, but I would say it's a number of times a year. That I guess I'm not prepared to give you a specific number of times, and I would say I'm guessing that it's about 50-50 when they're available to help us. Okay. But on something like that, really, it's not necessarily time. There's not a situation. If you're trailing a suspect, it's absolutely time sensitive. But I mean, if they're in a building. Well, if they're in a building, yeah, you can. But again, how long do you want our officers tied up? With our limited staffing, if we're going to be able to surround the building and keep it secure, that's going to tie up literally our entire staff that's on duty at any given time. And then the same for like victim, missing person, something. Isn't there already? I've seen people that train locally that they have bloodhounds that do training around for missing persons. Isn't there? I think if it's a person non-law enforcement, long time missing, I'm not aware of anybody that is locally that's doing that. It's very possible there is. I'm not aware of it. So again, that would take time. So the primary focus would be on drug detection. It's probably the number one focus. And I have a lot of problem with both the ethics and efficacy of using dogs in drug detention. There's a little bit of witchy stick magic that can be done to do that. And I think we do have problems with drugs in our community, but people also have a presumption of innocence and shouldn't be searched
without their knowing and for no probable cause. And I think that it allows for us as a government to further to further get into people's space. And like I said, I think that we've done a lot with our drug task force. Like you said, we have a number of arrests, and we have a number of strong things that we're doing to try to push back on this. But I don't see it. Like I said, I think there's some real ethical I have some real ethical problems in how it's applied, and there's a lot of, like I said, efficacy problems with what you're getting as far as a false read and false positive. And I think, in my opinion, that we should come down on the side of caution when it comes to that, because to me, like I said, yes, drugs and their effect on our community is a big deal, but equally big deal is how we treat people within the huge amount of power that we have as a government and that we instill in our police force to go and look for this. And I just want to be very careful with how we do that. And I don't think a dog is the right tool. I don't think it's. I think, like some have said, I think it's an expansion on a police force that we have a lot of people. We've got the folks to do a lot of this stuff. We've got partners. I would rather see us invest $50,000 in partnering with Grand Forks and other people to try to get better human collaboration on things than these type of things. But that's, I guess, my opinion. I haven't been, in my research, it doesn't seem like it does what I believe that law enforcement should do. But I'm one of 7, that's for sure. But that's all I have. Thank you.
I certainly appreciate your comments, and I think it would be in our best interest, obviously, to make sure that we are running the program ethically and not infringing on people's rights. You are correct. You do not, for a dog to sniff around a car, for example, we don't have to have probable cause. Law does not require that. You do have to have reasonable suspicion. You can't just walk your dog anywhere you want, and I can't just randomly go down to people's homes and have the dog sniff. You have to have, there has to be some basis for investigation. But you are correct. And we certainly don't want to be infringing on our citizens' rights. I don't ever want our department to be accused of that.
Anybody else have any questions? I think there's a couple of questions in there that maybe you need to look at that some of the councilmen had, and I don't know if you want to come back to the next work session with those answers, or do you think that time frame that you need? I guess it's up to you.
Well, I guess as I mentioned, if council would like some additional information prior to even authorizing the fundraising, we can certainly work towards that. If as I mentioned before, we're not requesting permission to start the program.
I think the problem that you're running into is that if you get $56,000 for somebody to do a dog program, and then the city says they don't want to have a dog program, what do you do with the $56,000?
Well, I do mention that in my RCA that we would be keeping track of all donors, and that money would then be returned to the commission. If we know we need $56,000 even just for startups, and we only get $30,000, at this point in time, the way our current city budget is, I would not be coming to the council to say, hey, make up the extra $30,000. Those funds would just simply be returned.
I guess the question would be, do you think there's ample enough time for you to get the information that you need to satisfy everyone by next week?
I guess I'll probably have to go back to the individual council members and see what specific information they're certainly trying to get.
Just wanted to make sure you had enough time. Okay. Melissa, anybody else have any questions for me? Okay. Thank you, Chief.
Adjourn.
No,
just
saying
some brief, unrelated comments. I apologize if it's kind of relatively time sensitive. The one is, in case people aren't aware, the National Christmas Tree will be on display at the U.S. Capitol. Is going to be in Grand Forks at Town Square this coming Sunday morning. Our department will then be escorting it as it drives through Grand Forks and then heads back out to the interstate at about 10:15 this coming Sunday morning. So if people are interested, they can go down. That will be a bit of an inconvenience, because of about an hour and a half, we will have to have the Missoula Bridge blocked up and closed for that tree to be able to be shown and then transported through. And touching back to approval you folks made a few weeks back, this early snowstorm in early November 2 weekends ago obviously caused some extra work for the fire department and a significant amount of extra work for Public Works, but it did have a positive benefit. The food donation program that you folks approved, just in the first week we actually raised over 500 pounds of food donations. So if there was a positive to come out of that snowstorm, that would be one thing, that the food bank has definitely seen a nice bump in donations from so thank you for your support on that. I'm sorry? Trio, so it'll be leaving Town Square, following Demers up to Highway 2, and then out to the interstate.
I was at the police department in an unrelated matter, and it was difficult to walk through there for the amount of bags of food that were just piled up everywhere that they were trying to find a spot for. So I noticed that it was successful.
Mayor, quickly, please.
One quick thing. On Thursdays when I come from my office hours, I go by the door of Hyro, and he's our transit planner that we share with Grand Forks. He's well connected in Winnipeg. And Hyro has wondered if we want to put together a trip to Winnipeg. So the whole council would be invited, staff, department heads, maybe others. So he's well connected in their city government. And so we would get a good insight into how the city of Winnipeg is governed inside the nation of Canada. And we know they've been really successful with the Forks. And so I think from an economic development aspect, they've been doing this for a long time, developing their waterfront. I'm sure we could take some lessons from them. So I guess you can just speak to me privately. We don't have to have a discussion now. I would hope that if we're going to do it, of course, there'd be a meal or two, and it sounds like there's going to be some hospitality from the Winnipeg folks, that they would actually take care of some of those things. And I would hope that the cost of this would be covered by private dollars, not anything going on the taxpayers. And so we could see about whether it would be a bus or some other way of getting up there, and any other miscellaneous expenses. We would make sure, if you all were up for it, and including council and department heads, that we would find a funding source outside of any tax dollars, outside of highway maintenance funds, and so just private donations. Thank you.
Anybody can do it.
That'd be a day trip. A day trip. Yeah, probably most of a day, back, I'd say, well after supper.
Okay, thank you, sir. Entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Repel.
Second.
Second by Vetter. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Meeting is adjourned.
Henry just lent it to you.
He's an honorary SWAT dog in the city of Grand
It's going to be a nice read.
Yep. The Hayes made him that.
Over the contentment, that's always a good thing. I'm 10. No, I have, there's 10 in there. I have the one you